And then comes the Camino as a path of self-discovery. Because in our journeying, we will discover, could we are destined to discover our true self, another self, if you like, a dual awareness. We still have our egoic identity of John Brierley, guidebook writer, all that is still there. But I suddenly become aware of another self that I never knew I had. And that is, for lack of a better term, it's my higher self. It's my wise voice, my wise being, that is trying to speak through me. But when my egoic voice and drama is so intense, it can't be heard. And those of you who've read the Celestine Prophecies, that was a very popular book out there, and it asks us to listen to the little coincidences that pop up in life. My journey here in this 3 weeks has thrown up the most extraordinary little coincidences that have brought me into a much bigger understanding of who I am. Indeed, those coincidences are that, if you like, that wise voice trying to come into my life. But with the other voice so busy and active, is this ringing or is it okay? Is that better there? Okay. And I might have just time before we break for a little snack to share you a little coincidence that links us again back to Australia. And you've heard it before, but I'm going to say it again. But a little coincidence I found down here in Sydney at the bottom of the mountain about 30 years ago. I was wandering around and I found myself literally drawn into a building that was being renovated that had scaffolding all around it. The workmen went on it, but it was closed and being renovated. And I found myself ducking in underneath the scaffolding and going into this empty building. And I was drawn down some steps, some stairs, into some sort of subterranean passageways, just enough light to see where I was going. And I was literally called and drawn down there, following an intuitive hit that I was beginning to recognize and follow. And I found myself at a door that was marked, "Do not enter." Now, I always like to say that in order to be a good guidebook writer, you have to be prepared to step through doors that are marked, "Do not enter." And indeed, we need to step through doors really in our own lives, because we need to step through those doorways. We need, of course, to be respectful of the guardian of the thresholds and only step through when we feel we have the sufficient courage or whatever it is that we need. But I stepped through that doorway because I felt that I needed to, or something drew me in, and there I found myself in the center of a sacred Aboriginal elder ritual. And as one of the elders approached me, I can still see this day that glistening naked body with the beautiful white and ochre stripes. And as he came over, and thoughts passed through my mind, oh my heavens, is this how it all ends? Or perhaps is this how it all begins? He took hold of me in his strong arms and he said to me, "Welcome, brother." He recognized spiritual family, which is what we are here. He recognized me as a brother, and he shared some of the rich understandings, that rich Aboriginal heritage that underlines the beautiful sacred landscape of Australia, which has tremendous and amazing similarities with the energy lines that underline the Caminos de Santiago. We won't really have time to go there, but I just wanted to put that there out to you. And then the last aspect of this sevenfold journey is, before we wrap up here for a little break, is bringing the Camino home. So when we step out onto a pilgrim path, that is a path that's dedicated to inner exploration, which the Camino de Santiago is, and for thousands of years pilgrims have walked that route with a high intention in mind, the intention to ask the big existential questions of life. I'm talking about the early Milesian Celts who were drawn west, called again by something. In the path of the Christian mysteries, it's referred to as the route of the stars, as the tribes followed the Milky Way west, drawn to the end of the world, Finisterre, which was the most powerful and most important and highest spiritual place on earth. There was no place of higher initiation into the spiritual world than at Finisterre, because that's where the world of matter met the world of spirit. And as the sun went down over the horizon, it went down to Tir na Nog, the land of eternal youth. We could not get closer to God in the medieval period than at Finisterre, which of course naturally links us back into the Camino de Santiago story, because of course we know pretty well substantiated that the early church always sought out places of high spiritual initiation on which to graft on its own new message of Christ's message of love, unconditional love. So that's how if you like, the Santiago story arrives into our lives, is because of Finisterre and because of that place of high spiritual intention. And then bringing the Camino home is where, once we have had, or an insight has come, and I'd met the most skeptical people starting off this journey, but something always happens. I mean, I'm sure those of you who've just back, or those of you who've been before, something always happens. Something always shifts or moves us in some way. I've never met anybody, even the most ardent, militant atheist, who hasn't freely said, John, I don't know what it is, but something has happened. Something has moved. I don't understand it, but I'm excited to explore it further. But if, when we come back home, so I have something of a dry throat, if when we come back home, we are welcomed back into our place of work, or family, or social circle, by those awful words which say, welcome back to the real world. We must be very, very careful at that point, because these little inner promptings, certainly in my experience, and anybody who speaks to me, they're very delicate, and they can very easily get swept away and diminished by others, if you like, ridiculing where we are, our newfound direction. So I implore you to find places like this. This is what's so important about these Camino family groupings, where we can come and share and support each other to hold on to whatever it was that we found, a new idea, a new value, a new understanding, a new direction, whatever it is, and to feel supported in holding on to that new dreaming by people who understand not our specific experience, but who are there to help us to say, no, hold on to that. That's what these Camino families are so important. So please use them, come to them, and feed them with your own experiences and wisdom, and feel nurtured and supported by them and with them. And just to leave you with this story, and that's, I think, probably perfect timing for a cup of tea, that in my throat could do with one, is this. I think it's a very inspiring story. You've heard it before, but I'm going to say it again, because it's true, and it's profound, and it gives a sense of where we might be able to go if we truly live our dream. And some years ago, I convened a conference in Findhorn, the Findhorn Foundation in Scotland, an international conference for business leaders from all around the world. We met, and the title of the conference was Business for Life. And underneath it, the subtitle was Reconsecrating Our Work. And the image we had at the conference was our office became our temple, and our desk became our altar. Our workplace became a place where we continued the insights of the journeying, the spiritual journey of the Camino, actually into our workplace. And there's a lovely Rumi, I think it says, my life is my temple and my religion. It's not what I do on a Friday prayer at the mosque. It's not what I do in the readings in the synagogue on Saturday. It's not what I do at Mass on a Sunday. It's how do I live my life on Monday. And if you want to know my religion, look at me, come and see what I'm doing on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. And then you'll know who my God is and what I profess, what I'm living. But there was a man there called Richard Barrett, and he is no longer, but was a director of the World Bank. And he arrived at his office building in Washington, apparently, as he says it, on a really miserable, wet, grey day. And as he parked his car and got out, he said to himself, I can no longer go on and live my life as a lie. My life has to represent my inner values and my spiritual reality. And if it can't, I will leave it. And I will absolutely, now's the time, I can no longer do this. So he went up to his office, went up on the lift, and he wrote an internal email to the entire staff of the World Bank. And he said, I have reserved a room on the ground floor at 6:30 this evening. And if anybody is in the bank interested in exploring how their work in the World Bank can uphold and support their spiritual development and unfoldment, please meet with me at 6:30. Now, he knew in writing that email, he was putting his career on the line, because that could have been the end of Richard Barrett as a director of the World Bank. But what happened when he went down on the lift and the lift doors opened, and in his own words, he said he thought there had been a fire. Over half the World Bank had turned up to meet with him to have that discussion. So they hurriedly opened up the assembly hall, and over 300 people piled into that night. And that very evening, listen to this, the World Bank Spiritual Unfoldment Society was born. One man having the courage to name what was important to him, and he found such wonderful stuff. We're all hungry. So don't be fearful to name what's important to you. I'm naming what's important to me and finding resonance through a huge amount of people out there who are crying out for purpose and meaning in their lives. And to put the thing in balance, there was one man putting himself out there in his career. One 15-year-old girl from Sweden also decided to put her life on hold, and she sat outside the Parliament building with a plaque asking us to wake up. And her name was Greta Thunberg. And look what she has achieved in 2 years. It is absolutely staggering what we can do if we have the courage of our conviction and have a clear direction. Expect support, because it will be there. And remember the words of Marianne Williamson. It's not the darkness that most frightens us. It's our light and our power. And we're each of us powerful, and each of us, as professing pilgrims, because that's what we are doing by going and putting ourselves on the Camino path, it's our job now and our time to wake up and to support each other to help that shift, that paradigm shift, that great turning of human consciousness away from our selfish, egoic, destructive understanding to a higher understanding, to our true eldership. And we need to do it because who else is there out there? We're the ones, and we must grasp it. We have a task to do, and we have a support network that is all around the world. Every country in the world has sent pilgrims onto the Camino. So we have a worldwide support group. So let's use it to shift the human consciousness into where it can become really part of the solution. So let's now take a little break for tea. And when we come back, we'll have a little ritual to start the latter half of the afternoon and prepare up some questions or something that you would like to put in for the second half.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. Thank you. Thank you.